They didn't expect it to exist, and when they saw it, they didn't know how to explain it. In the heart of West Africa stood a city with straight roads, planned neighborhoods, powerful kings, and walls so vast they stretched farther than anything Europe had ever built at the time. European visitors wrote about it in disbelief. Some even said it was too organized to be African. Then suddenly, the city vanished. Not through time, not through decay, but through fire, theft, and silence. What remained were scattered artworks in foreign museums, beautiful, haunting pieces with no city behind them anymore. This is not a story about art. It's a story about a city that challenged the world's assumptions and paid the price for it. This is the story of Great Benin. Long before European cannons thundered across West Africa, long before museums locked African art behind glass, there was a city that functioned with quiet confidence. It did not announce itself with noise. It did not beg to be discovered. It simply existed ordered, disciplined, alive. The city was Benin. To understand why its disappearance shocked the world, you must first understand what it was before anyone tried to erase it. Benin was not a village that grew by accident. It was not a collection of huts slowly expanding outward. It was a deliberately planned urban center, built with intention, hierarchy, and vision. Every road, every compound, every wall served a purpose. At the center of this world stood the Oba, the king, not merely as a ruler, but as the spiritual and administrative heart of the city. His palace was not hidden or distant. It was woven into the city's structure, connected by wide, straight roads that radiated outward like veins from a heart. European visitors would later describe these roads with confusion and admiration. They were not narrow footpaths. They were broad, straight avenues, carefully maintained, stretching far into the distance. Some were wide enough for several people to walk side by side comfortably. Others led directly from the palace to distant quarters of the city, creating a sense of order that felt unfamiliar to outsiders. This was not chaos. This was design. The city was divided into zones. Craftsmen lived near workshops. Traders operated in specific districts. Priests and ritual specialists occupied spaces close to sacred sites. Residential compounds were enclosed, clean, and organized around courtyards. Privacy and community existed side by side. Homes were built with earth, wood, and skill passed down through generations. Walls were smooth, often decorated. Roofs were engineered to handle heavy rain. Drainage systems guided water away from living spaces. Waste was managed. Streets were swept. This mattered because when Europeans later arrived, they did not describe filth or disorder. They described a city that felt functional, a city that worked. One Dutch visitor in the 1600s wrote that Benin streets were straighter than those in his own country. Another described the city as stretching farther than the eye could see, with compounds laid out so precisely it was difficult to believe it had been built without written plans. But Benin did not rely on paper. It relied on memory, discipline, and tradition. Knowledge passed orally through guilds, families, and ritual roles. Builders learned from builders. Metalworkers learned from masters. Governance followed rules reinforced by ceremony and consequence. Nothing was random. Beyond the city itself stood something even more astonishing: the walls. For centuries, Benin was surrounded by an immense system of earthworks, walls and moats that extended for thousands of kilometers when combined with surrounding settlements. These were not crude barriers. They were carefully engineered embankments, some towering high, others stretching endlessly across the landscape. Modern researchers would later calculate that these earthworks represented one of the largest human construction efforts in history, larger in total length than the Great Wall of China. And yet, few people outside the region knew they existed. The walls served multiple purposes. They marked territory. They controlled movement. They protected trade routes. They signaled power. They told anyone approaching that this was not an open settlement to be wandered into casually. This was a sovereign city-state. Inside those walls, life moved with rhythm. Markets bustled with goods from across the region: ivory, pepper, cloth, beads, metalwork. Benin was deeply connected to regional and international trade networks long before European domination. Merchants traveled established routes. Prices were regulated. Disputes were settled through recognized authority. Artisans were not hobbyists. They were professionals. The bronze casters of Benin worked with extraordinary precision, using the last wax technique to create plaques, heads, and figures that recorded history, rituals, and power. These were not decorations. They were archives. Every plaque told a story. Every figure marked an event. Every casting reinforced legitimacy. The Oba's court understood the power of imagery. Art was governance. Memory was control. Religion and politics were inseparable. Rituals reinforced hierarchy. Festivals renewed loyalty. Ancestral veneration anchored authority in the past while guiding the future. To live in Benin was to know your place not as oppression, but as structure. Roles were clear. Expectations were enforced. Stability was valued. This is what outsiders struggle to understand. Because when European traders arrived first, the Portuguese, then the Dutch, then the British, they did not encounter what they expected. They expected scattered villages. They expected disorder. They expected superiority. Instead, they encountered protocol. Visitors were received formally. Trade was regulated by the Oba. No foreigner moved freely without permission. No deals bypassed authority. Prices were not dictated by outsiders. This frustrated European traders. They were used to exploiting division. Benin offered none. The city's discipline extended even to diplomacy. Foreign merchants lived in designated quarters. Trade occurred on Benin's terms. When relations soured, access was restricted. When rules were broken, consequences followed. Benin did not beg Europe for validation. Europe needed Benin. Pepper from Benin was once so valuable that the region was called the Pepper Coast. Ivory fueled European demand. Artifacts flowed outward slowly, controlled, intentional. But admiration and resentment grew together. European records from the 16th and 17th centuries are filled with contradictions. Writers praised Benin's organization while questioning how Africans could have built it. Some suggested ancient outsiders. Others hinted at lost civilizations. Few were willing to accept the obvious conclusion that this city was African, built by Africans, governed by Africans, sustained for centuries. The discomfort was subtle at first. Then it hardened. As Europe industrialized and its hunger for resources intensified, cities like Benin became obstacles rather than partners. Sovereignty became inconvenient. Control became the goal. But before that moment, before fire and looting, Benin stood complete. Children grew up knowing their trades. Elders passed judgment. Priests maintained balance. Artists recorded history in metal and memory. Roads remained straight. Walls stood firm. This was not a forgotten place. It was deliberately forgotten later. And that is what makes its story dangerous to simple narratives. Because Benin was not primitive waiting to be saved. It was not Celtic waiting to be ordered. It was not silent waiting to be discovered. It was a city already complete. When the first flames would later rise, they would not destroy ignorance. They would destroy proof. Life in Benin continued, steady and deliberate. But cracks were beginning to show not inside the city, but in the eyes of outsiders. Europeans had always admired Benin. They marveled at its streets, its order. It's odd, but admiration turned quickly into unease. How could a city in Africa rival cities in Europe? How could it remain independent, controlled, and unbroken? While other kingdoms fell to foreign influence, traders whispered in corridors. Officers scowled at the Oba's protocols. Merchants grew impatient when their demands were denied. What had once been curiosity had shifted into anxiety. Benin's power was subtle, but undeniable. Its armies were disciplined, its intelligence networks efficient. The Oba's reach extended far beyond the city walls. Outsiders realized the city was not just surviving, it was thriving on its own terms, and that terrified them. At the edges of Benin, diplomats tested limits. A misplaced comment, a delayed tribute, a misunderstood gesture, each misstep sparked warnings. Yet, Benin handled it with ceremony and authority. Never violence, always measured responses. For the Europeans, that was the problem. They could not control it. They were used to coercion, to bending kingdoms to their will. Benin did not bend. Stories traveled across the coast. Traders spoke of bronze plaques depicting kings who had ruled centuries earlier, of walls stretching endlessly, of streets cleaner than many European towns. Every account magnified the sense of impossibility. Some European visitors began questioning themselves. Could it really be that Africans had built all this? Was there a secret, a lost knowledge, something unknown that made Benin exceptional? Doubt gnawed at their pride. The first seeds of tension were sown. Then came the whispers of greed. Benin's wealth, ivory, pepper, bronze, was immense. Europe wanted it, demanded it, expected it. But the city had rules. Tribute, trade, and protocol governed interactions. Access was granted carefully, not handed freely. And slowly, admiration became resentment. Curiosity turned into impatience. Fear became ambition. Control became the goal. Yet Benin remained calm. Its people worked. Its craftsmen cast bronze. Its priests performed rituals. Its Oba ruled with a quiet, unshakable authority. Outsiders could plan, plot, and speculate. The city continued to thrive unaware, or perhaps unbothered, by what was brewing beyond its walls. For now. For centuries, Benin had stood as a city that seemed untouchable. Its walls, its organization, its thriving markets, all signs of a kingdom in perfect rhythm. But the world outside was changing, and the city's calm order was about to be challenged in ways it had never faced before. Europe's hunger had grown beyond trade. It was no longer enough to admire or negotiate. Some had begun to covet what they could not control. Ivory, pepper, and bronze were no longer mere commodities, they were trophies. Power had to be taken, not requested. At first, it was subtle. Ships appeared along the coast under the guise of trade missions. Diplomatic letters hinted at partnership, but carried veiled threats. Observers circled the city walls, noting the layout, the defensive structures, the daily routines. Some Europeans even tried bribery, sending gifts to officers and minor officials, hoping to gain access without following the city's strict protocols. Every attempt failed. Benin was prepared. When tension escalated, the Oba acted with strategy, not aggression. Troops reinforced key gates, patrols monitored the outer roads, and city officials maintained order in the marketplaces. The people went about their lives, confident that their city could withstand any intrusion. Outsiders, however, grew impatient. They could not bend this city, they could not exploit it, and they would not leave it alone. Then came the fateful moment, a European expedition, armed not just with curiosity or trade goods, but with cannons, muskets, and intent. They claimed a mission of diplomacy, but their eyes were filled with greed. Their plans left no room for the Oba's rules. When they reached the city, their response was swift. The gates were closed. Couriers ran to warn the Oba. Drums beat across the walls. Yet the Europeans pushed forward, confident in their technology, certain that their firepower could bend any kingdom. It did not. For a time, the city held. Defenses were reinforced. Soldiers manned the walls. The city's layout worked in its favor. Choke points slowed the invaders. Observation towers gave warnings. Yet Europe was persistent, and persistence can be deadly. Over the weeks, Benin's resilience faced tests unlike any before. Some outer compounds were burned, some treasures seized. Panic was avoided, but fear began to creep into the hearts of citizens. Families whispered of the power of the foreigners. Merchants worried about their trade. Craftsmen guarded their workshops. And then came the moment that would echo through history. The palace was breached. What should have been inviolable, the symbol of sovereignty, was under direct attack. The Oba's men fought with skill and courage, but numbers, technology, and planning began to turn the tide. Bronze plaques were torn from walls. Sacred artifacts were stolen. Streets that once felt safe became battlegrounds. The city that had survived centuries of growth, governance, and diplomacy was now under siege. Yet even in destruction, the city's story endured. The walls did not crumble completely. Some neighborhoods remained intact. Craftsmen hid tools and molds. Priests safeguarded sacred knowledge. The Oba himself survived, preserving leadership even in chaos. The city was battered, but not entirely erased. Europe left with what it coveted. Ivory, art, and treasures flowed abroad. Ships carried the spoils to distant museums, collections, and private hands. Benin had been partially conquered not by annihilation, but by theft, ambition, and historical silence. What remained in the city were memories, whispers, and stories. Streets that once bustled with trade now carried an air of caution. Courtyards that had echoed with ritual were quieter. Yet the spirit of the city lingered in hidden workshops, in the memory of the people, in the oral histories that would survive long after the bronze left the city. The invaders believed they had taken control, but history would later show that they had not destroyed the heart of Benin, only displaced parts of it, scattering its brilliance across the world. And this is where the modern story begins, in the scattered bronze plaques, the maps, the writings of stunned visitors, and in the whispers of a city that refuses to be forgotten. Benin had survived many centuries, and though the city itself would never be the same again, its legacy was only beginning to emerge through art, memory, and the lessons it left for generations to come. The flames had died down. Smoke drifted over streets once alive with trade, laughter, and ceremony. The walls of Benin still stood, but the city's rhythm had been broken. Yet even in its battered state, Benin refused to vanish from memory. Europe had taken what it wanted: the ivory, the bronze plaques, the symbols of a kingdom's pride. They had left behind ruins, displaced people, and a quiet, simmering spirit. but they could not erase centuries of knowledge, nor the deep-rooted traditions that had sustained the city for generations. The bronze plaques became messengers of a lost city. In distant museums, they told stories. Europeans could not fully interpret kings in ceremonial regalia, rituals etched in metal, achievements recorded in art history. Each piece was a fragment of Benin's history, surviving far from its birthplace. And yet, in the city itself, life went on. Streets healed, compounds were rebuilt, workshops reopened, priests, craftsmen, and elders carried forward the knowledge that had survived centuries of growth, conflict, and theft. Though the city's heart had been struck, its pulse continued through the people. Benin's story spread first through oral history, then through European records, and now through modern scholarship. The world learned, sometimes slowly, sometimes too late, that this was a civilization of discipline, ingenuity, and resilience, that its order and beauty had challenged outsiders' assumptions about Africa, that a city could be advanced, organized, and thriving long before Europe recognized it. Yet questions lingered. How had Europeans, armed with superior firepower, disrupted the city without completely destroying it? How had the Oba and his people preserved so much knowledge despite the chaos? How many other cities, empires, and civilizations had been erased before leaving only fragments behind? This is the haunting part. Benin's story is both lost and alive. Lost in the sense that much of its physical grandeur was taken or destroyed. Alive in the sense that its people, culture, and art continue to inspire, challenge, and educate the world. Today, when we see Benin bronzes in museums, we are not just looking at art, we are looking at proof. Proof of a city that thrived, a kingdom that challenged assumptions, a people whose legacy refuses to be silenced. Great Benin may no longer stretch its walls across the landscape, and the streets may no longer echo with the rhythms of everyday life, but its spirit remains in the stories, in the artifacts, and in the enduring mystery of a city that once stood so powerful, so complete, and so advanced that the world could not easily accept its existence. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Civilizations can be hidden, history can be rewritten, but the truth, when preserved in memory, art, and scholarship, refuses to disappear completely. Benin lives not as it once was, but as it must be remembered. History didn't lose this city by accident. It was forgotten because it challenged what the world believed. If this story surprised you, there are many more like its cities, empires, and civilizations that never made it into textbooks. Subscribe if you want to uncover them, and tell me in the comments, which lost city should we explore next?